Did you know that after the age of 50, burning visceral fat is not always about eating less? In fact, for many people, progress starts getting faster when they stop obsessing over what to remove and start focusing on what to add. And that matters because visceral fat is not just the fat you can pinch, it is the deeper fat that wraps around your organs, drives inflammation, worsens insulin resistance, and makes your metabolism feel slower than it used to. So, yes, calories still matter. A calorie deficit is still the foundation, but after 50, visceral fat becomes much more responsive to hormones, blood sugar swings, inflammation, appetite signals, and even muscle loss. Which means two people can eat the same number of calories and still get very different results depending on the kinds of foods they choose. And that is where most people get stuck. They think fat loss is only about discipline, only about eating less, only about walking more. But visceral fat is biologically active tissue. It is constantly sending out signals, and it is constantly reacting to the signals you send back through food, sleep, stress, movement, and muscle mass. So if your meals keep inflammation high, spike blood sugar, and leave you hungry an hour later, visceral fat tends to stick around. But when your meals improve satiety, stabilize glucose, support muscle, and calm inflammation, that deep belly fat often becomes much easier to lose. So in this video, I want to walk you through 8 of the best foods to help burn visceral fat after 50, and more importantly, I want to show you why they work, not in a hype-driven way, not in a magic food way, but in a science-backed metabolism-first way that actually makes sense. And if you use these foods consistently, especially inside a high-protein, calorie-aware routine, they can make the process feel much less resistant. The first food I want to talk about is Greek yogurt. And Greek yogurt is one of the most underrated foods for people over 50 who want to shrink visceral fat faster. And that is because it solves several problems at the same time. It gives you protein, it improves satiety, and depending on the type you choose, it can also support gut health. And those 3 things matter much more after 50 than most people realize. The process can make your metabolism feel slower, your appetite feel less predictable, and your blood sugar less stable. And when muscle mass goes down, your body becomes worse at handling carbohydrates. That means more glucose stays floating around in the bloodstream, insulin tends to stay elevated longer, and visceral fat storage becomes easier. So when you eat a higher protein food like plain Greek yogurt, you are not just getting a snack. You are sending your body a signal to preserve lean tissue, stay fuller longer, and reduce the urge to keep grazing through the day. There is also research suggesting that yogurt consumption is linked with lower adiposity measures and lower risk of metabolic problems over time. Now, to be clear, a lot of that evidence is observational, which means it shows association, not direct causation. But that still matters, because the pattern shows up again and again. People who eat yogurt regularly often do better with waist-related outcomes and metabolic health. And Greek yogurt specifically gives you a better setup than sweetened regular yogurt because it is higher in protein and usually lower in sugar. Now here is the part most people miss. Greek yogurt works best when it replaces something worse. If you are swapping a muffin, a sugary cereal bowl, or a pastry breakfast for Greek yogurt, that is where the magic starts to happen. Because you are lowering the sugar load, raising protein, and making it easier to control hunger later. The easiest way to use it is simple. 1 bowl of plain Greek yogurt with cinnamon, a few berries, or even some crushed nuts. That is a much stronger breakfast or afternoon snack than most healthy convenience foods people reach for. The next food is extra virgin olive oil. And I know this surprises people because they still hear the word oil and instantly think that means more body fat. But extra virgin olive oil is very different from the cheap processed fats that show up in ultra-processed foods. It contains monounsaturated fats and polyphenols that can support insulin sensitivity, reduce inflammation, and improve how your body handles energy. And that matters because visceral fat does not just grow from calories. It grows in metabolic environments where the body is constantly being pushed towards storage. There was a randomized clinical trial in women with excess body fat where extra virgin olive oil was included in an energy-restricted diet, and the olive oil group lost significantly more body fat than the control group. Now, that does not mean olive oil is magic on its own. And it definitely does not mean you should start pouring it on everything without paying attention to portions. But it does suggest that when extra virgin olive oil replaces less helpful fats inside a calorie-controlled diet, your body composition can improve more efficiently. And this is one of the biggest mindset shifts people over 50 need to make. Better fat is not the enemy. In many cases, the right fats make fat loss easier because they improve meal satisfaction, reduce overeating, and create a steadier blood sugar response. Extra virgin olive oil also makes healthy foods easier to stick with. Vegetables taste better, beans taste better, salad becomes something you actually want to eat, and consistency always beats perfection. A very easy way to use it is 1 to 2 tablespoons across the day. Drizzle it on cooked vegetables, use it in a simple salad dressing, or finish soups and lentil bowls with it. The key is to use it intentionally, not invisibly, because even healthy foods still count. But when used well, extra virgin olive oil can be one of the smartest fat loss supportive upgrades you make after 50. The third food is beans, lentils, and chickpeas, in other words, pulses. And if there is one category of foods that does not get enough attention for visceral fat, it is this one. Pulses are loaded with fiber, rich in plant protein, and incredibly effective at slowing digestion, which means they help reduce the blood sugar spikes and crashes that often drive hunger, snacking, and fat storage around the midsection. There is a meta-analysis of randomized controlled trials showing that dietary pulse consumption led to modest weight loss even when diets were not specifically intended to be calorie restricted. Some of the included trials also suggested reductions in body fat percentage. That is a very important point because it tells you these foods do not only work through willpower, they change fullness, food intake, and metabolic control in a way that makes better outcomes more likely. And after 50, that is exactly what you want. You want foods that work with your physiology, not against it. Beans and lentils are slow-burning carbohydrates. They come packaged with fiber and protein, which makes them fundamentally different from refined carbs. They keep you satisfied longer, improve gut health, and help your body handle meals with less insulin drama. And when insulin swings calm down, visceral fat often becomes easier to reduce. Another thing pulses do very well is they make meals more filling without requiring huge calorie loads. A lentil soup, a chickpea salad, or a bean bowl with olive oil and vegetables can keep you full far longer than a sandwich or processed snack pack ever will. And that is how you make fat loss feel less like a fight. You build meals that naturally close the hunger loop. If you are not used to eating them, start small. Add lentils to soup, add chickpeas to salads, replace part of the rice on your plate with beans. Even one serving a day can make a difference over time. And no, they are not glamorous. But when it comes to shrinking visceral fat, boring foods often outperform trendy foods. The next food is green tea, and green tea is one of the most consistently discussed foods when it comes to abdominal fat because of its catechins, especially EGCG, along with a modest caffeine effect. And what makes green tea interesting is that it does not just wake you up. It can nudge your body towards slightly better fat oxidation and better energy handling, especially when paired with movement. There are randomized trials showing that catechin-rich green tea beverages improved body composition and reduced abdominal fatness, and in another study, green tea catechin consumption enhanced exercise-induced abdominal fat loss. Now again, I want to be careful here. Green tea is not going to melt away years of visceral fat by itself. But that is not the point. The point is that it can create a small but meaningful metabolic advantage when it becomes part of a consistent routine. And this is where many people underestimate compounding. They keep looking for one giant intervention when the real answer is usually several moderate interventions stacked together. A protein-forward breakfast, better fats, more fiber, strength training, a daily walk, better sleep, and maybe 2 cups of green tea replacing a sugary coffee drink. None of those changes are dramatic by themselves, but together they can shift the whole system. Green tea also helps because it often displaces worse choices. If your afternoon slump normally leads you towards soda, a sweet coffee, or mindless snacking, having green tea there instead can interrupt that whole cycle. And sometimes fat loss improves not just because of what a food does, but because of what it replaces. You do not need anything extreme here. 1 to 2 cups a day is enough for most people. If you are caffeine sensitive, go earlier in the day or choose a lighter version. The point is consistency, not chasing mega doses. Visceral fat responds better to repeat signals than heroic effort. The 5th food is fatty fish. So that means salmon, sardines, trout, mackerel, and similar fish that are rich in omega-3 fatty acids. And fatty fish matters after 50 for a few different reasons. First, it gives you high-quality protein, which helps preserve muscle. Second, it provides omega-3s, which are linked with better inflammation control and healthier fat metabolism. And third, it usually replaces less helpful proteins that come packaged with refined carbs, seed oil-heavy breading, or processed ingredients. Now, I want to be very honest about the evidence here because that matters. Mechanistically, omega-3 fats look extremely promising. Research reviews suggest they may support fat oxidation and limit fat storage in tissues, but not every direct intervention trial shows a dramatic drop in visceral fat. In fact, one randomized trial of fish oil supplementation in overweight men did not find a significant reduction in visceral fat or liver fat compared with placebo. And that is important because it reminds us that isolated supplements do not always reproduce the benefit people expect. But whole fatty fish is still a powerful food because real food works through more than one pathway at once. You are not just getting omega-3s. You are also getting protein, satiety, better meal structure, and usually a cleaner replacement for lower quality dinner choices. And for people over 50, that protein piece is huge. The more muscle you preserve, the better your long-term glucose handling and metabolic rate tend to be. And that indirectly helps with visceral fat too. You do not need fatty fish every day. 2 to 3 times a week is a strong target. Canned sardines are one of the most practical options because they are convenient, affordable, and usually lower in mercury. Salmon is great, trout is great. The goal is not perfection. The goal is to build a routine where your body gets repeated anti-inflammatory and muscle-supportive input every week. The sixth food is oats, and oats are one of the best examples of how a very ordinary food can do something extraordinary when used consistently. Because oats contain beta-glucan, a soluble fiber that slows digestion, improves satiety, and helps flatten the blood sugar response after meals. And when you are trying to reduce visceral fat after 50, that matters a lot more than flashy branding. One study found that regular oat consumption improved obesity-related measures and abdominal fat distribution. And even beyond body fat, oats are also known for supporting cholesterol levels and overall cardiometabolic health. So this is one of those foods that gives you a double win. You are not just working on the scale. You are working on the metabolic environment that allowed visceral fat to accumulate in the first place. Here is what makes oats especially helpful in this age group. Morning appetite is often deceptive after 50. Some people are not truly hungry, so they skip breakfast, then overeat later. Other people eat a breakfast that is technically small but metabolically weak, like toast or cereal, and then they are starving by mid-morning. Oats, especially when paired with protein, solve that problem really well. They digest slowly, they make meals more satisfying, and they reduce the need to keep chasing quick energy. Now the form matters. Instant flavored oatmeal packets are not the same thing as plain rolled oats or steel-cut oats. The more processed and sugary the product becomes, the more you lose the advantage. A better setup is plain oats with chia, Greek yogurt on the side, or even a scoop of protein mixed in if that works for you. That kind of breakfast is not exciting in the marketing sense, but metabolically it is much stronger. And the biggest advantage of oats may be how reliable they are. You can eat them regularly, they are inexpensive, they are easy to prepare, and they make it much easier to avoid the breakfast choices that quietly keep visceral fat hanging on. The seventh food is avocado. And avocado is one of those foods people either overhype or unfairly avoid. Some people act like it is a miracle fat burner. Others avoid it because it is too high in calories. But the real reason avocado deserves a place on this list is because it combines monounsaturated fats with fiber in a way that improves fullness and may even influence abdominal fat distribution. There was a randomized controlled trial showing that daily avocado consumption changed abdominal adiposity distribution among females. That is a fascinating finding because it suggests the quality of fat in your diet may shape where fat is stored, not just how much. Now, that does not mean one avocado a day suddenly erases visceral fat, but it does support the broader principle that food quality changes the biology of fat storage. Avocado also helps because it makes healthy eating more sustainable, and sustainability is not a side issue, it is the whole game. When meals are too lean, too bland, and too unsatisfying, people rebound. They start snacking, they start craving sugar, they start telling themselves they have no willpower. But often the real problem is that the meals were never satisfying enough in the first place. A half avocado added to eggs, salads, lentil bowls, or even alongside salmon can make a meal much more complete. And when meals feel complete, you stop negotiating with yourself all day. That is one of the quiet secrets behind lasting visceral fat loss. The fewer food battles you have in your head, the more consistent you become in real life. The eighth food is eggs, and eggs are one of the best foods for controlling appetite, especially at breakfast. They are rich in protein, convenient, and extremely effective at helping people feel satisfied on fewer calories. And that matters because one of the easiest ways visceral fat sticks around is through repeated overeating that does not feel like overeating. A pastry breakfast here, a mid-morning snack there, a little grazing in the afternoon. It adds up fast. Research has shown that an egg breakfast can enhance weight loss when combined with an energy deficit diet. There is also evidence in adults with type 2 diabetes showing improvements in waist circumference with egg inclusion in the diet. And that makes sense because eggs provide a much stronger satiety response than the refined carbohydrate breakfasts many people rely on. This is particularly important after 50 because appetite regulation becomes more important, not less. If your breakfast is weak, the rest of the day often falls apart. You get hungry earlier, you crave quick carbohydrates, and you end up eating reactively instead of intentionally. But when breakfast starts with enough protein, your hunger curve changes. And when your hunger curve changes, your calorie intake often changes without you having to force it. Now, if you want to use eggs strategically, breakfast is usually the best place. Eggs with sautéed vegetables and olive oil. Eggs with avocado. Eggs alongside oats if you need something more filling. And if you are tired of the scale not moving even though you eat healthy, this is exactly the kind of upgrade that can change your day without making your life harder. Now stepping back, I want you to notice something important. None of the foods I mentioned are random. They all target one or more of the same root issues: poor satiety, unstable blood sugar, inflammation, low protein intake, weak meal structure, or a lack of fiber. And that is the real strategy for shrinking visceral fat after 50. You are not trying to find a magical superfood. You are trying to build a metabolic environment where visceral fat is less comfortable staying. And this is where Dr. Avia Carter would emphasize something that almost nobody wants to hear, but everybody needs to hear. The best foods for visceral fat do not work because they are exotic. They work because they improve the quality of your routine. They help you stay full. They help you eat less without feeling punished. They help you preserve muscle. They help you keep blood sugar steadier. And they help you repeat the process long enough for your body to finally start changing. So if I were to simplify this as much as possible, here is what I would tell you. Build your day around protein and fiber first. Use healthy fats strategically, not fearfully. Replace refined breakfasts with real breakfasts. Stop letting snacks do the job that meals should be doing. And focus on foods that make consistency easier, because consistency is what actually gets rid of visceral fat. Anata falmus is no faris derben fengsin. Ezens estare milmium. Naut ishu break mannen. Is an acantagated forting thing. New desengs nampanao sing green tea instead of a sugary drink. Lentils or chickpeas at lunch with olive oil and vegetables. Salmon or sardines later in the day. A half avocado worked into one of your meals. That kind of pattern is not extreme, but it is powerful because it keeps sending your body the same fat loss supportive signals over and over again. And one last thing, do not make the mistake of adding all 8 foods on top of an already excessive diet and expecting visceral fat to disappear. These foods are tools, not loopholes. They work best when they replace the foods and patterns that helped create the problem in the first place. So yes, keep portions in mind. Yes, stay active. Yes, strength train if you can. And yes, prioritize sleep, because poor sleep can make visceral fat much harder to lose. But if you build your meals around the foods we talked about today, you will be making the process much more efficient. Visceral fat after 50 is stubborn, but it is not random. It responds to better signals, better meals, better satiety, better glucose control, better muscle support, and once you understand that, fat loss stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like strategy. If you want results, do not ask which food burns the most fat in one day. Ask which foods make it easier for you to eat well for the next 6 months, because those are the foods that change your waistline, your energy, your labs, and your long-term health. So the 8 best foods to burn visceral fat after 50 are Greek yogurt, extra virgin olive oil, beans and lentils, green tea, fatty fish, oats, avocado, and eggs. Not because any one of them is magic, but because together they improve the exact metabolic conditions that visceral fat depends on to survive. Start with 2 or 3 of them this week. Build simple meals around them. Repeat them until they become normal. And give your body enough time to respond. That is how real fat loss happens, not through panic, not through gimmicks, through better signals, repeated long enough to finally change the system.